Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And we're going to be talking about... Are we going to be talking about both books or just the one?
Well, we're going to be talking about the one because I haven't read the other one.
So, you have been reading one of the... So, I never knew this, but like, when I was a little kid, not little kid, but like reasonably small kid, Sci-Fi Channel started doing Saturday anime. And one of the movies that they showed was called Vampire Hunter D. And, you know, I watched it back then and never knew anything about it other than there was a movie. But apparently this is like a really long-running series of novels that the movie was based off of.
Yep, it sure was.
And like, I looked this up yesterday, but there's like 40 of them or something like that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the last time I looked, it was like 32, so yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of books for one particular character and setting.
Yeah, and they're all either roughly novella or full-length novel stories. So this isn't like a short story thing, which is surprising because I don't know if we didn't talk about Vampire Hunter D before, did we?
I mean, I think we may have mentioned it once in passing.
Yeah, I don't know if we did a full thing on it, but I know that it was very recent that I discovered the books. I actually discovered them by going to Barnes & Noble looking for something to read, and then I was like, well, nothing in the books, nothing in the sci-fi books, nothing in the fantasy books.
Yeah.
I'm going to head on over to the Japanese stuff, and so they got the manga and light novel section. Most people don't even know that it's a manga and light novel section. That's my favorite part, because like, you would think they would take the books and put the books on the bookshelves so that people know their books.
Right.
But the only way to really tell that they actually have books, because they've got them mixed in with the comics.
Yeah,
so
right.
you kind of have to like, you can kind of tell sometimes if you pick one up, it's like, this one looks like it might be a novel instead of a comic, but not always. So you really have to like look at the top and see if there's any like ink bleed or anything coming off the pages.
Yeah,
and
right.
Sometimes there's margins in the book, so you have to open them up and check.
Right,
but they do have novels kicking around. And one of them that I came across was, I guess they're doing omnibuses for the Vampire Hunter D novels. They're doing 3 books per omnibus.
I guess that makes some sense, considering how many of them there are.
Yeah, and they were... When did he start writing them? The 80s?
85? Something like that?
Well, no, because it had to have been before the first movie, so 83, I think, was the first one.
Okay. Interesting.
And I remember reading through the first one, which was the story that they based the original movie off of.
Right.
And, I mean, there were enough differences where it was... The book was genuinely better, and I really liked the animated movie.
Yeah.
But the differences were such that I think within 4 years previous of having read this book, I had gone through the entire Solomon Kane collection.
Okay.
And I'm reading through and I'm thinking, this is a lot like a Robert E. Howard novel. I mean, D is the name of the character in the book. And D himself is just like a superpowered Solomon Kane because he's half vampire.
Right.
But yeah, he's kind of going through the same motions. You know, he meets up. A lot of times these stories, involves some kind of battle with a powerful enemy or multiple
Sure.
powerful enemies.
Right.
And in the case of the first novel, he was up against a vampire who had they're in this post-apocalyptic world setting. And
Yeah,
I guess at one point,
it's very mishmashy. Like it's technically post-apocalyptic, but technology is kind of collapsed in a lot of ways, but not in some. And so there's some weird technology stuff, but like in general, it kind of has that Victorian feel to it. I mean, I'm describing the movie, but
yeah.
it's very mishmashy. It feels like throw it in there.
Yeah, well, the movie made it a bit less obvious about what was actually happening. I mean,
Yeah,
when I got through the first book, it was like, oh, there's like a whole backstory to what's going on with all the vampires in this world, and
yeah,
it kind of gave you a loose explanation of, oh, well, the vampires at one point when humans had nearly destroyed the planet, the vampires surfaced and tried to correct a few things, and they shared some of their technology with humans, but they kind of sort of also enslaved the humans.
yeah.
And there's some loose connections that they make between Dracula, the original vampire. At least, I don't know if they've said he's the original in that story, but Dracula is mentioned in the stories.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Dee
he's
has
mentioned
some
in the
kind of...
movie too. Like he's
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, and Dee has some kind of connection to him that they don't give you in the first book.
sure.
So anyway, the book read a lot like Robert E. Howard, and I was just like, he had to have been inspired by Robert E. Howard's stories. This is so much like Solomon Kane. And I spent like a month looking on the internet trying to find some kind of connection
Yeah.
between... And then it turned out that the book I had bought actually had an About the Author section where it talked about how much of his inspiration came from Robert E. Howard's Pulp Fiction stories.
Oh. Well,
So,
that's
yeah, I could have saved myself a little bit of time there.
yeah, congratulations, you've just earned the achievement common knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, it was painfully obvious that that's where he took inspiration from, but
Sure.
it's got its little twists. I mean, he is not a one-for-one Solomon Kane character. He's a lot like him in the sense that he's got a one-track mind on what he's going to do, and he
Yeah.
doesn't really he's not a Puritan by any standards. I mean, he's half vampire,
Right.
and he's not fighting some kind of battle for justice, although he'll dish some out on occasion. He's there to
Right.
hunt vampires and to take on jobs that people pay him to do. But a lot of times he might waive the fee or kind of change the structure of payment he expects in a
Yeah.
Nero Wolfe sort of manner where,
I was
this
just gonna
person can't
say, yeah.
afford to hire
My
me,
dignity
so
requires me to solve this mystery for you.
yeah. Like the story I am in the middle of, there was this pearl that everyone was after,
Right.
and this girl wanted to hire Dee to protect her family and protect the pearl, and so he
Hmm.
decided, okay, I'll take the pearl in payment. That way, any of the danger comes to me, and
Okay.
so that's kind of the plot element, and the whole story is kind of
Doesn't
revolving
that kind of
around...
like? I mean, but like, doesn't that kind of invalidates the purpose of the job, though, doesn't it?
Well, at first, so basically there's these two girls. This is the story that we're going to be talking about. By the way.
Yeah. Let's back up for a second here. What's the name of
Yeah.
the author?
The name of the author is, I never remember it because I always get it mixed up with the artist. It's
Right.
Hideyuki Kikuchi is the author,
Okay.
and
And the author is Yoshitaka Amano, right?
No, the illustrator is Yoshitaka Amano, the
Oh, okay.
infamous Final Fantasy VI and so forth artist.
Final Fantasy. Period.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, well, I mean, he doesn't do much for it now, does he?
Maybe not at this point, but he did like all of them up
4,
through
5, and 6, I think. I don't know if he did the original ones.
He did all the original ones too. Yeah.
He did? Oh,
Yeah. No, I have I bought a very nice what is it, it's like a gigantic book of Amano's art that covers, I think, like the first 8 or 9 Final Fantasies, and it's all him.
So he's a well-known artist, and
Right.
he did all of the covers
Hmm.
for the Vampire Hunter D books.
And what's the title of this particular book?
Well, this particular book is called Mysterious Journey to the North Sea, Part 1.
Right.
I have not read Part 2, because when I decided we should do this, I didn't realize there were 2 parts, and so I finished the first one and was like, oh, well, we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah. Are they both part of the same omnibus piece?
Yes, this is the
Okay.
third omnibus that I am reading through.
Okay, good. We've now established information for people who might want to read this before we get into spoilers. So if you are listening to this and you don't want to hear plot synopsis and that stuff, now you know the name of the author, which omnibus it is, and which story we're going to be talking about. And just real quick, good, yay or nay?
Yay. Big yay.
All right, cool.
In fact, this story was excellent as I read through it, and I feel like it might be one of the very higher-end Vampire Hunter D stories, just because the author in the postscript also seems to think so.
Okay.
And there's a lot going on in it. I mean, they're generally good anyway. Even the one where it was like, these people are driving, like, A-team death vans around.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, no, that it really was. It was out of nowhere. I was like, there was one character who tried to, there was this group of people that was all after the same person, and one of them had a death van which was outfitted with a whole bunch of weapons and like scythes and things.
Okay,
and she was really good at driving it. It was interesting. It was very interesting.
So, have you read all the books, all the stories leading up to this one, or have you kind of picked and chosen?
No, this is the fourth one that I've read. I read the first omnibus. I could not find a paperback version of the second one, so I skipped to the third one, because you don't have to read them in order.
Okay.
They're pretty self-contained stories, with the obvious exceptions of the part ones and part twos, which are apparently very few.
Okay.
Actually, how long is the postscript here? Yeah, so there's a one-page postscript, and I can give you a little bit of an idea, just to read through some of it. It says, the 2 volumes of Mysterious Journey to the North Sea were to be the first multi-volume tale in the Vampire Hunter D series, which has since gone on to include others like Dark Road and Pale Fallen Angels.
Okay.
Up until that point, each tale had consisted of 350 to 400 handwritten pages. But along those lines, I couldn't tackle any really grand stories. There was also a limit to the number of characters I could use. As a result, I was growing increasingly frustrated. Now, even in a 10-page short story, something is either interesting or it's not, and in a massive 5,000-page tome, you won't tell a story that can't be told. Since I've already undertaken the Herculean task of writing a 3-volume tale for my first adult-oriented novel, I wasn't particularly worried about penning 1,000 pages of Vampire Hunter D. I adhere to the motto that bigger is better, and even when it comes to boasts and fabrications, I like them as large as possible. I tried to repress the propensity while working on this book, but while I was writing this volume, I stopped and said, at the end scene where Dee descends into the huge pit, which resembles the scene where it resembles the scene where the Count goes down the wall in Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's exactly what I was thinking when he was describing Dee walking down this wall. What was it, a mile or more across? As I recall, on the way down, Dee looks back and sees that the opening is far off in the distance, and that it's shrunk down to the size of his little finger. However, if the diameter was more than a mile, Dee would have to climb down 100 miles before the opening would seem to shrink to that size. Although I noticed this right away, due to my own foolish nature, I usually let consistency fly off into the depths of space once I get a grand vision in my head. That being said, I didn't want to rework the image into something weaker, but to climb a mile down into a hole and have an opening as wide as it is deep, still gaping above you, that's just comical. Honestly, I was really stuck at that point. Still, there are parts in Mysterious Journey to the North Sea and later works that later works couldn't touch on. The section where Dee and the heroine visit a noble's manse and reflect on the beauty of that civilization is something I haven't been able to use since, and it's the scene that best illustrates the elegance and refinement of the vampires. I hope that will please all of you vampire fans out there. Mysterious Journey to the North Sea is actually one of the candidates for the next animated feature. Bit of a lie. As is a remake of the first story. And if they decide to do this story, I truly hope they include that scene. Though to be perfectly honest, I'm not a big fan of anime at all. Which, I thought that was a great line to end. One of the most famous anime of all time. And the guy that is responsible for it existing is just like, I'm not that big a fan.
I don't like this stuff.
But yeah, this is very much... Oh, yeah, this was written in November 1st, 2006, and we never got that Vampire Hunter D movie.
So I only recently learned about the second Vampire Hunter D movie, but that was based on which books?
I don't know what the second one was based off of. The first omnibus I have
Yeah.
claims that one of the stories in there is what the second movie, which was called Bloodlust, was based off of. And I read through all three stories, and I could not for the life of me remember anything in there that related to Bloodlust.
That matched the Bloodlust movie.
Yeah, however, I haven't seen Bloodlust since it came out in 2000. So I'm thinking that
maybe you're just foggy on it?
Well, no, because I think that Bloodlust actually took parts from several stories, and it wasn't just one of the stories done in movie format.
Sure.
Because there was like one part where I was like, that kind of reminds me of some of the stuff that happened, but not really, because, I mean, there was a rocket ship in Bloodlust, and this may sound weird, and it was kind of weird to see it when I watched the movie, because obviously the movies don't give you as much information as the books, but the world of Vampire Hunter D does include vampires on Mars.
Oh,
and it was one of the things that when the vampires saw that Earth was kind of falling apart and it wasn't... The vampires realized that humans would one day outpace them and that they weren't long for existence. And so some of them took to their high technology and got in their rocket ships and just went to Mars to colonize another planet. Because that's kind of where the post-apocalyptic setting in this story comes from, is that there's all this ancient vampire technology that far surpasses human technology, but it was kind of abandoned. And so there are a few people that understand some of it. There's an interesting part in the very first story where one of the vampires that is still around, his castle is protected by a bunch of robotic and automatic security equipment. But none of it can really affect D, because being half vampire, he has an amulet. It makes it look like magic essentially in some of the stories, but the amulet is just something that signifies to the machinery that he's one of the nobles.
It's like an ID card, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so nothing really attacks him. It's a very interesting setting, and it's kind of fun to read more about what the vampires did in the past a lot of times than what's going on in the story, just like the history of it. But then the story itself has some really great stuff. So like the Solomon Kane stories, they tended to have a lot of swashbuckling and gunplay. Right. And there was usually a fight or two involved somewhere. And Vampire Hunter D takes similar strides and usually has... And so you know, if I could think of a close comparison that probably anyone that doesn't get the stuff in Vampire Hunter D isn't going to get anyway, but the closest comparison I can think of is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where the bad guys all have really strange abilities, and they're often, you know, sometimes they think they've got the drop on D, but they don't realize just how powerful of a... They call them... It's the half vampire names. They call them Dampiers.
Yeah.
And so D he's really quick with a sword. He's got a lot of...
It's funny,
go ahead.
I remember watching the movie, and like the English voice acting was bad enough that I thought that they were saying vampeel. Like like
yeah, no, it was hard to tell what they were saying in the English dub. I do remember that.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, D has a lot of supernatural abilities.
Sure. He's got that hand, and
he has a talking hand. The hand is like its own entity, and for the most part, he far outclasses any opponent that comes up against him. And usually, the opponents are aware of this, and a lot of the perspective change is going to the villains and them sitting around saying, "All right, how are we going to take D out?" And for the most part, they try.
That's kind of cool.
And
like
it's
you actually get
neat.
kind of like a what's one of those like parodies have done it, where like there's the group of bad guys that get together around a table and like plot, but like this sounds like a better version of that.
The Hall of Doom. You know, it's that kind of thing. And a lot of times the villains have a lot of character in the stories. Some of them like working with the other people. Some of them are just like, nope, out for myself. Everyone's a backstabber. They're usually right. There's a lot of backstabbing that goes on in these stories. But for the most part, people end up fighting D, and they think they have an upper hand, and they find out really quickly that they do not. And then every once in a while, there's something that happens in a fight or some outside circumstance, or even just one really good opponent that does smack D around a bit, and he either has to disappear for a bit and come back and fight again, or he has to solve a problem, or in a few cases he's rescued by someone else.
Yeah.
And the things that happen in the story are, you get one character that maybe is really good at with some kind of combat skill, so a good swordsman for D to go up against.
Okay.
Or you have someone who has a weird ability, some kind of sorcery, like in
the movie there was that guy that could like reverse space around himself.
Yeah, and so D had to figure out how he was going to stab a guy that couldn't be stabbed.
Right.
Yeah, and I in the story I'm currently reading, there's a guy who can if he makes a good enough sketch of someone, he can control that person.
Oh.
So there's some weird superpowers, and there's also a lot of mutants.
I'm thinking of Final Fantasy VI and the character Realm, who can sketch enemies and make them, or just take control of them too with the right relic. That's a pretty funny connection between that particular power and Yoshitaka Amano and Final Fantasy VI.
I mean, that story. So this story would have probably been written. It might have been written before, actually. It's hard to tell.
Well, Final Fantasy VI was 93, 94, something like that?
I don't know exactly where the print date of this particular story would be in this book.
It's probably somewhere in the book, but yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know which one it would be referring to.
That's fair.
Well, I mean, since it's the first one, it would. But this is the 7th story he wrote, so it's possible that was later in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's an interesting cast of characters. This story, I'm only halfway through it, and he has just filled this book with characters. There's this guy at the beginning of the book that we haven't really gotten back to yet, but he was the one that was after this pearl that someone had found, and at some point D shows up and cuts his head off, only for everyone to find out that, only for the reader to find out that he didn't actually die in a scene following that where he puts his own head back on. But he's like this enormous guy who would be crushed under his own weight if he didn't have a machine holding him up.
Yeah.
And he's the one that hired... Well, go ahead.
I just looked it up, and Mysterious Journey to the North Sea is 1988.
Okay, so that would be before Final Fantasy VI.
Yes. Significantly.
Yeah, so Realm is definitely not the basis for this character.
Well, no, but this character might be the basis for Realm.
Yeah. He's a cool character, too. His name is Professor Krolak. And he's looking to be the big bad guy in the next part of it. He hasn't really confronted D directly yet in the story, but he's interfered with some of the other villains, which there are many.
Yeah.
There's a cast of 5 villains that are hired by this monstrously fat gentleman in a machine called Gilligan, which I love the names that he has for some of these characters. And Gilligan wants these 5 people to recover this pearl. And so these 5 people are all different bounty hunters or mercenaries, what have you, who have all been charged with getting this pearl. And they realize pretty quickly that they're up against D. And some of them are afraid of that, but all of them are kind of committed to the job, and so they're going to figure out some way to work things out. A few of them came close to obtaining the objective, but you had an illusion master who had one of the funniest scenes in the book, only because of the mental imagery going on in my own head.
Okay.
At one point, when the jig was up and D had figured him out, he decided that he was just going to take off, and the way it was described almost made it sound like the guy was the image in my head was that he was a balloon that just deflated his way off into the sky. Yeah, but he was this illusion master that was making everyone on a boat think that there were all these rowdy individuals and that D should do something about it, but D kind of figured out what was going on pretty quick and took care of that situation.
That's surprisingly obtuse of a thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it was all just this distraction to try and get close to the pearl and get away with it. I guess, yeah. It's just that. Well, all right. What's your plan? Okay, so they're on a boat. Okay, what are we gonna do? Like take the boat? No. We're not gonna take the boat.
We're going to create illusions. Illusions, and then we'll scare them, or we'll herd them all into one part of the boat, and then we'll have free reign. No. We're not going to do anything like that. No, we're going to pretend that there's some guys who are a little bit drunk, and they're kind of very rowdy on the boat. Okay, then what? Well, those rowdy people on the boat will be a distraction, and then we go in. But you have the power of illusion. You could just you could terrify these people. No, we don't want to terrify them. We just want to make them think that somebody had one drink too many. I guess you're the boss.
Kind of like that. I mean, it was a bit more like, oh, these guys are going to kill people, but the big trick of the illusion was that the kid that they were going to kill was actually the illusion master himself trying to get close to the pearl.
Oh, okay.
And so, he was looking for Dee to protect him. There's a lot of interesting... I won't say that it's... Some of it is pretty, smartly played out. A lot of it tends to come to a conclusion really quickly, like Dee figures things out really quickly, which isn't to say that he's not one of those characters that's just completely infallible. He's no Ray Peril, let's put it like that. Okay. Oftentimes he's distracted or doesn't see through a trick right away, and sometimes the people that he's protecting do die. And he has several situations in this book where, like one time the girl he's protecting kind of wanders off. She ends up under one of the bad guy's spells, and gets led off in another direction where they're going to take the pearl from her, only to find out that Dee is the one with the pearl and not her. And you get an interesting cast. Some of the villains have a sense of honor, some don't. The book ended on the 5th villain that he's supposed to fight, and you only get a brief glimpse of what the guy can do, so the next book is going to start with that, so I haven't gotten to that yet. But
the next villain? Magnet Man.
Not quite. It seems like he has something to do with being able to alter his weight and being really fast, because...
I was just making a Mega Man joke of like robot bosses.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes it feels like that. Not all the stories do.
Yeah.
I know I think the second book is nothing but like a hot pursuit of Dee chasing after a vampire who has kidnapped someone not kidnapped. Dee has been charged with returning someone's daughter to the family, but the daughter wanted to run off with this vampire. But Dee is not...
Dee doesn't care about that.
Yeah. Dee is being paid to do a job, and he's going to do it. So the entire book is just his pursuit of this vampire, and the vampire outwits him several times, and Dee just has to keep pressing the charge to finally get there. So Dee is not a completely infallible character that always wins.
Is he? If he's not Ray Peril, is he like line segment Peril?
Yeah, he might be a line segment Peril. I mean, he usually is very much overpowering his enemies. He fights. They describe werewolves in these stories as being faster than the speed of sound, and yet Dee is able to precisely attack them with his sword, meaning that he is an incredibly fast swordsman. And this is maintained throughout all of the books, where a group of guys might try to attack him, and all of a sudden all of their hands have been cut off and nobody even saw the flash of the sword.
Okay.
So it's very much supernatural entities at work, and even the really good warriors that come up against Dee, like there's a guy who is able to make a circle where everything inside of it is under his command, so he can he can turn branches into trees to block attacks and confuse
everything
the
in
enemy.
a circle is under his command. So he's like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, the villain.
Yeah, everything in this. It's just getting that headshot that's tricky sometimes.
Right.
But he can kind of mess with gravity and mess with... he can make monsters out of the earth, and all of this ends up not mattering in his battle with Dee, because Dee also has some supernatural abilities.
Uh-huh.
But, he has a bit of trouble fighting this guy, but even so, while they're fighting, this bad guy is saying things like, oh, I was almost done in for there. I need to be more careful when I'm fighting this guy. And they do present him as being a very competent and skilled warrior in his own right, but he's just completely outclassed by Dee and needs the extent of his powers even to compete with him. So
right.
D is definitely a step above a lot of people. There's other vampires in the story that, they're a bit more of a match for him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people with strange abilities that give him trouble.
Mm-hmm.
There's a town he ran into in one of the books full of mutants that all had really weird abilities, and a lot of them went after him, and it was not an easy time. He's simultaneously.
Well, I mean, if I remember correctly, that guy who in the first movie could like bend space around himself, they called him a mutant. So
yeah, usually it's the mutants that have these weird powers.
Right.
And then there's also magic and sorcery and things, and then of course there's technology. There's a guy in a robot suit that fights him at one point.
Oh, awesome!
Lots of really fun and weird stuff. Now I know it sounds less and less like a Solomon Kane story the more I say, but it is.
Right.
These really do read like Robert E. Howard stories.
Okay. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's a good thing.
Yeah, they're really, really good. I mean, a lot of people think Conan the Barbarian. They think some big dumb idiot that is really strong and has a sword, but he's one of the smartest guys in the stories when you read them.
Right.
He's just got a very direct approach to everything.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a point where like he says I'm trying to remember the exact story, but I'm having trouble. But there was a point where Conan the Barbarian has some kind of really detailed insight about something. And he says something very wise, but he's also very straightforward about how he goes about doing stuff that he's trying to do, kind of thing. It was an interesting mixture, I thought, when I read a little bit of the Conan stories.
Yeah, well, there was that story where he ingratiated himself onto a slave ship and he slowly planned his way to take it over. And that one
I haven't read that one. That's really cool.
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff like that. He is the iconic adventurer of adventurers.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of just went his own way and did his own thing, and it was never really a thing of just being a brute. He was, in fact, the commentary that you often got out of those stories was Conan talking about how it's the civilized men that are the true barbarians.
Yeah.
And, there's not quite the same commentary in the Vampire Hunter D novels. This is more someone who was heavily inspired by Howard's work, but wanted to write supernatural action stories with monsters and battles and things like that. And then the characters, D's character is pretty straightforward. He works for money. He likes to, he prefers to take jobs hunting down nobles. If there's vampires causing trouble, he'll show up to...
Quick question. Are nobles and vampires interchangeable, or are they different things?
Yeah, only the vampires are really nobles. D himself wouldn't be counted as a noble, even though he's got some of their technology and...
Okay.
He's half of one, but...
Okay.
The nobles are the vampires. That's what the characters in the stories refer to them as.
Okay.
And they do so for very good reason, because the few vampires that are still around, when they own a town, they essentially own a town, and there's very little the people of that town can do about it.
Sure.
Now this particular story I'm reading kind of goes all over the place, and it's only halfway finished, and there's just so much going on. It starts with this girl comes into a town wanting to sell a pearl, which, if the bad guys had just bought the pearl from her, it might have saved a lot of trouble. But
yeah, that seems like the easy way to do things.
Yeah, so essentially they cause this big ruckus, which leads to this girl meeting D and saying, I have this pearl and people are trying to take it from me. Can you help me? And he helps a little. Is there
something special about the pearl that they want it?
Well, there's definitely something special about it, but nobody knows what it is yet. And if anyone does, they haven't said what it is. So I'm not going to find that out until the second part.
That's so slapdash. It's like, I don't know. I think there's something special about this pearl. What? No idea.
Well, I think that the one person who kind of started everything knows what's special about it. Gilligan, the guy the big guy in the machine, seems to know something about the pearl. Okay. So Gilligan hires these 5 people to go after the pearl. They do catch this girl, and they end up killing her, and Dee finds their hideout, and her dying words to Dee are to return the pearl to her sister. So that's his new charge. He's not being paid for that, but he doesn't care. Someone's dying breath telling him to do something. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll honor this request.
That's very Solomon Kane right there.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can already see some of that seeping in. And he
Yeah.
also attempts to off Gilligan on his way out the door, but he doesn't realize that whatever it is about Gilligan that kept him alive with his head being cut off, it hasn't been explained yet because we haven't gotten back to Gilligan yet. But
I'm thinking about like you already said this. There's some JoJo like elements. I'm thinking of like stands that are named after lines from 1980s sitcom like opening themes, and so like Gilligan's special ability, he could just call 3-hour tour, and he can turn the clock back 3 hours at any point.
Well, it's even funnier if you read the story. The way it's described is that his head kind of slid down, and then Dee walks away, and then after one other little short section in the story, it goes back to Gilligan, and his body is still moving, and he picks up his own head and like smushes it back onto his body, and just sort of grumbles about how he's going to make Dee pay for that.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
And then he sends his 5 minions out after the pearl. And so they give chase to Dee. They give him a bit of trouble on his way to return this to the sister. Meets up with someone at some point. So there's some other woman in the story that he meets up with. A lot of times he'll meet up with a character, and it seems like they're going to be a mainstay character, but they end up just being there for a short period, just to be an assistant or, someone that Dee can help out in the interim while he's doing his real job.
Okay.
So this woman gives him a ride into the town with the sister. They kind of take off. I don't know if they're coming back in the story. There were a couple of points in the story. I think it's due to the translation. The events that were going on weren't very clear. Like, there was a part where the sister she had a spell on her, and the sorceress was making her think that her dead sister was still alive. And I guess this sorceress's powers that if you have any real attachment to someone, she can use them to manipulate you. So she's using this dead sister to get the girl to give her the pearl, but she doesn't have the pearl because she gave it to Dee. And there's apparently another woman that shows up in this scene, but the way that the wording was, I couldn't tell who was being talked about for a minute. Like, it kept seeming like it was just this sorceress, and then there was an illusion of the sister, and then there was the other sister. But apparently, after I got through that, apparently it was that Professor Krolak guy was putting thoughts into the sorceress's head.
Okay.
And ultimately told her to go throw herself off a cliff because he didn't want anyone interfering with him getting the pearl. Someone saves the sorceress, which means that all 5 of these characters that were in the first half of the book that are hunting Dee are still all there in the second half. And it's just like so much happened in this one book, and nobody has bit the dust yet, except for this one girl. And I'm just like, where is this story going? There's just so much going on. Because, you've got those 5, and then you've got Professor Krolak wants the pearl. There was another guy at the beginning of the story that told Dee that they'd meet again, and he's after the pearl too. And he had like he showed up briefly one time in a town that Dee was passing through, but I don't think Dee even knew he was there because he got into a fight with someone else. And then there's apparently, because the girl with the pearl, I think her name was Wu Lin.
Okay.
She asked Dee to stay and help protect them, and he was like, I can't do that. I don't have a job here. Unless you've got a vampire that needs hunting, I'm out. Because he is kind of like that. He's like, he does things throughout the story where at times it's like, okay, I will protect people to a point, but like, when he's climbing down that hole mentioned in the postscript, he says, wait here, and Wulin says, there's no way I'm waiting here in the middle of this dead noble village. I'm going to go with you. I want to see what's going on. Yeah. And he tells her, all right, if you fall, I'm not helping you. So So he's kind of just a very straightforward and blunt character that is, he'll work for you, but he doesn't have any real emotional attachment to a lot of these characters at times.
I mean, I guess that makes some sense.
He feels like he's just doing a job.
He's the wandering mercenary kind of character, and he doesn't make those kind of ties. And If the job doesn't interest him, then he's not gonna do it.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, because he's like that for most of the stories, when he occasionally does show like actual caring for other characters, it makes it pretty cool. You know, the first story, there's the little brother that it's Dorothy and her little brother were the ones he was protecting in that story, and he kind of has a moment of teaching for the kid before he leaves, and you know then he takes off, and they just get a brief glimpse. People get brief glimpses of Dee smiling occasionally. He doesn't do it that much. So there's something there. He's not like just a completely heartless ghoul that just works for money.
Yeah.
But he's gotten this far in this story where he's been protecting this pearl. Now everyone is after him, and you even get the final bad guy in that, or not the final bad guy, but the final one we see in the first half.
Okay.
He finally shows up, and Dee is like, so you must be the fifth one. And this guy, because a lot of the villains have some personality to them, which is welcome.
Yeah.
He says, all right, so look, do we discuss it? Is there anything to discuss? Is there any way I can talk you into just giving me the pearl? And Dee makes it clear.
Or selling me the pearl, or... Yeah.
And, you know, the girl is there too. With him. And so Dee shows him the pearl, and he goes, all right, you've got the pearl. Don't worry about her. I won't touch her. She's safe.
Yeah.
You can give me, in fact, you give me the pearl, I will personally carry her out of this hole for you. And so it's kind of like, look, I'm just here to do a job too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But obviously they're going to fight. And so this seems to be the one character that might be giving Dee trouble at the beginning of the next book, because what they have done is they have come to this dead noble's mansion. Dee agreed to work for Wu Lin because she said that there is actually a vampire terrorizing people. What luck. And so they do a bit of investigating, trying to figure out what's going on. Yeah. And Dee determines, okay, there is something going on here that I need to check out, so I'll take the job. And the payment, of course, I said was the pearl. And it seems to be working pretty well. It has protected Wu Lin, that he has had the pearl this whole time, because now none of the bad guys really care about her.
Yeah, yeah.
So now he's going to fight this this new guy who was apparently the noble that they are currently investigating. Did a lot of experiments on creatures and humans and vampires alike. And this person that he's going to be fighting at the beginning of the next book is one of the creations of this particular vampire. So I still have that to look forward to.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of how these books go. It's like, here's a bunch of events going on. Here's a bunch of really scary villains with strange and
unfathomable powers.
Yeah, and Dee has to kind of cut his way through them on occasion, or he has to outsmart them. You know, he'll just ignore them if they don't really seem to be in the way of him doing what he wants to do. So even if they show up like, I'm going to fight you, he might just brush past them and be like, I don't care about you right now.
Yeah, I've got other things to do.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But there's a lot of details in it. The world building in these books is really fun. Okay. You get a real sense of like some of the towns that are just barely hanging on, or some of them are thriving. The ones that live under the vampires, you get a sense of everyone's fear of the vampires.
Yeah.
It's really well fleshed out, and every single one of them so far has been worth a read.
Okay.
This one in particular, I mean, look, we're talking about writing and books here. I can milk 40 of these novels for, stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
We can definitely do that for the next part, because there's no point in us talking about this one without talking about the next one. But that won't necessarily...
I'm down for that.
Yeah, that won't necessarily be our next one, but we'll get to it.
We'll get to it eventually.
Yeah,
I mean, these books started coming out in, 1980, early 1980s, and...
Yes, I want to savor them. I do not want to rush read.
Well, it's not just about savoring, but it's like there's no rush.
Yeah. They exist, and I got to catch them all. And I've still got all the Slayers novels to read, and yeah, well, we can discuss that, anytime. But
we'll get around to them, yeah.
But yeah, this is a book that I had a lot of fun reading. The first story is really good. I don't know if this one quite beats that very first story. It's got to be up there. It might be my second favorite.
Okay.
There is one that involves a girl who is actually herself a vampire and doesn't realize it, I think, or something like
okay.
that.
That's kind of neat.
I need to reread that one because I was half asleep reading most of that one, but it was there were a couple of good adventures in these stories, and there's always a hint of mystery, like, well, what's actually going on here? You know, there was one where these kids showed up that should have all been dead, and everyone was like, they have to be vampires. They can't possibly be real people. These people all died, only to find out that no, they never actually. Well, they never actually died, but the reasons for it are kind of convoluted, and I won't spoil any more than that. You know, pick up these books and read them. They're great. Yeah, the world building in this particular one is one of events happening in a town where a girl shows up and Dee happens to be passing through, which is kind of always how these start. Dee is passing through somewhere, and since the world is just littered with danger, there's always a story to be told. Okay. So he kind of just rolls in and accidentally ends up involved in this Pearl situation. He ends up having to travel to another town to take the Pearl back to this sister. There's crossing an ocean on a boat, and there's some high seas swashbuckling adventure there. You get to meet a couple new characters and see a few more fights. Lots of fights in this book.
Yeah.
They get off the boat.
How's the action done? Well,
the action is pretty good.
Okay.
It's somewhat more in depth than most action.
Okay.
But it doesn't stay on the action too long because the world building is a lot more of the story. Usually when there's a fight, it's a couple of pages. If it's a really, really big fight, it might be 10 pages, but I think there was only one time, and I don't think that was even in this book. But there's constant new battles ahead.
Okay.
I mean, I think Dee was in 10 fights in this book between the 5 characters. He faced 4 of them, and it ended on the 5th one.
Yeah.
He faced Professor Krolak once, but didn't really have a battle with him. They just sort of met. He fought another guy who may be a friend or maybe an enemy, but Dee doesn't know yet.
Okay.
There was a group of guys in a town that didn't really like Dee, and so they tried to beat him up, but they quickly learned that...
That probably didn't go very well.
Oh, no, it didn't at all. This guy was going to box Dee, and Dee just cold-cocked him, knocked him right out. and then his 5 friends... This story does a lot of cool little things where, like, there's occasionally characters that... It's a world just full of people who are backstabbing and out for themselves, and you occasionally get these glimpses of people that have honor in the stories, and so it's really cool when it happens. So the guy that gets knocked out, his friends decide that they're going to attack Dee, and they've all got weapons. You know, they're farmers and fishermen. They got sickles and spears and things, and those are the guys that, you know, Dee just wasn't having any of it. He was like, oh, okay, and he just cuts off all their hands at the wrist, and then the sheriff comes running out and points a gun at Dee, and he's like, well, I'm going to have to arrest you, and Dee's like, it was self-defense. They all had weapons and came at me. And then the guy that he had knocked out gets up and he goes, hey, Sheriff, I'm the one that started that fight. I told all my friends it was just going to be me and him. I told them not to jump in. He was just defending himself, and I deserved what I got. And the sheriff was like, all right, I guess I can't really arrest you then. But it was just cool. It's just like, yeah, this guy really wanted to fight Dee. He still has something against him, but, you know, he's just doing what he thinks is right.
Yeah.
You get a lot of characters that get painted as pure evil. Some of them are, they're evil to a point, but then they're like, I'm not going to hurt lots of people. I might do some sinister things to get what I want, but I'm not going to kill off a town of people.
Sure.
Lots of different layers to the different types of characters.
Okay.
And the adventuring, you definitely get a sense of Dee crossing a lot of different terrain to get to the places he needs to be.
Okay.
Him and Wulin go off on a boat when they realize that this vampire that they're investigating may be coming from the sea and attacking people because people in the town are disappearing. So they hop on a boat, and he's like, yeah, take me to where the nobles used to live. She's like, well, nobody really likes to go there because, you know, the nobles used to live there. He's like, just take me.
Do as I say.
Yeah, so they go, And
Yeah.
they're just investigating what is being described as these palatial estates that these vampires had. You know, some of them as big as the town itself, and it was just like a cluster of vampires that were on this big outcrop in the water, surrounded by water, and there were probably, I believe the number was something like 1,000 or 10,000 nobles must have lived here.
Okay.
And
Wow.
you get a real sense of just how grand the vampire society must have been just by the investigation. I mean, it's like tomb diving happens a lot in these stories.
Yeah.
Very,
Okay.
very archaeological. And again, that's another thing where, you know, this is a Robert E. Howard Lovecraftian thing where people will go and visit these places that are forgotten by time and contain these mysteries and supernatural things.
Traps and things that you really probably don't want to wake up, kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that actually might be a good recommendation, is for anyone that might want to read these books. If maybe not as many people know Robert E. Howard, except for, I mean, most people know Conan, but don't know who wrote Conan that I've met. So, you know, maybe they don't know Robert E. Howard, but there's a lot of Lovecraftian feel to these stories too. So if that's your thing, you will probably like Vampire Hunter D stories.
Okay. That's very, I don't know, I think I'm going to have to pick one of these up and check it out, because I have not yet.
Yeah, just start with the first one. The first one was a great book. I'm sure that's the reason that he ended up becoming so popular to begin with, was that very first book right out of the gate was a hit.
Okay, good.
And it's got an animated movie. You can read the book and then go watch the movie, or vice versa. I mean, I saw the movie first, and once you read the book...
I've seen the movie a couple of times, but I definitely would be interested in seeing that in book form.
Yeah, there's a lot more detail.
Especially with all the world building you say there's in there, so that sounds good.
Oh yeah, I mean, some of the things that happen in the movie that don't... There were a few things when I went back and watched the movie, I was like, well, that makes a lot more sense now that I know what's actually going on in this world.
Oh.
There were a few minor changes with what the actual vampire enemy was doing.
Sure.
They kind of got away from that whole thing where... They didn't spend as much time on the fact that he was continuously trying to kidnap Dorothy in that story. Because there was a significant part of the books where they were setting up traps and Dee was keeping watch on the farm, because the vampire that is in the movie that you don't really see until the end, he kept invading this farm trying to take Dorothy away.
Yeah.
So there was a lot more to the story than the movie showed.
Okay.
And there was
that sounds fun.
There was actually another character in the story that was kind of jealous of Dorothy. She was she was the daughter of the vampire, and she was really jealous of Dorothy in the story because she thought, well, no, it wasn't the daughter. Maybe it was.
The daughter was in the movie.
Yeah, but in the book there was a lot more jealousy from the daughter because the dad was not as interested in her as a family as getting this new vampire wife girl from the village.
Yeah.
And they didn't really play into that as much in the movie. They didn't talk about it that much.
I mean, I feel like they did, but I mean, I guess it was a couple of scenes.
Yeah, anyway. it was very brief, but it was like the main focus of the story in the book.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because I think they have that. There was a scene where there was like a portrait of the woman that the vampire used to love, and it looked a lot like Dorothy or something. I might be remembering wrong.
Well, but I mean, in the movie, there was that whole subplot where the vampire daughter ended up like kind of helping Dee a little bit. I think, if I remember correctly. Yeah, because she was like, I don't want this person in my family that much, and I think this is there was a whole little subplot there, but apparently it's much bigger in the book.
Yeah, there was a lot more that happened with that subplot in the book. The vampire daughter had several different occasions where she was either helping or standing in Dee's way.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. Well, we'll have I'll put a link in the description to this omnibus and maybe the first one too, since we've talked a bit about both of those. But yeah, sounds like I mean, I picked up a copy of the collection of the Solomon Kane books, And those were a lot of fun. And I've read one or two of the Conan stories, not that much, but I mean, Robert E. Howard was a fun writer, and if what did you say his name was? Kikuchi? Something like that?
Yeah, it's Hideyuki Kikuchi.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if he got inspiration from Howard, then this might be worth reading. So sounds fun.
Very much so, and Conan the Barbarian stories are really good stories. Honestly, I think the Solomon Kane stories were the best work that Robert E. Howard did.
Yeah, it's funny. The most exposure I have to the Conan stories is or at least the closest I have to exposure to the Conan stories is probably the animated television show that was back in the early 90s, I think.
I should probably go and check them out. They might cover a lot of what happened in the books. I mean, they would have had to soft serve them for kids, but they definitely would have touched on some of that. It's a really neat world that he was placed into. It felt barren in a lot of ways, but also full of weird dangers.
Yeah, then I also picked up a copy of there's some comic book group that is doing they have to for intellectual property reasons they had to call it The Sumerian, but it is a couple of the Conan stories in comic book form.
Yeah, I picked up the first issue of that and I have yet to read it. I might have to.
It's pretty good.
I might have to check that out. Maybe we can discuss that.
Oh, sure. I can go look through it again, actually, because I haven't in a while. It'd be fun to go give another look.
All right. Are we?
Anyway.
Are we?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Vampire hunted out?
Well, I mean, not hunted out, but maybe for today. We will probably cover some more of this once you get around to reading some of it, or maybe I will, or whatever. And but it sounds like good fiction, and we're all about that here.
Highly recommended. It's a different pace from just about anything you're going to find on bookshelves today.
Okay, I think that's a good recommendation. We have a lot of problems with people kind of having that pace where the story just yells at you for the whole content of the book. So,
or people have been writing their stories to be kind of like the old television show Lost, which I blame that show in particular for ruining television going forward, and it seems like whatever magic sauce they had in that show kind of seeped into books too. I mean, we've talked about the written for Netflix problem, but I think there's also a touch of, I have to give, you've said it before, the mystery box thing.
It's mystery boxes, yeah.
And we just don't have to answer them at all if we don't want to, but we
do, but like the thing about a mystery box is that you should have something of an idea of what the answer to that mystery box is before you write the mystery part of the mystery box, because if you don't, you're going to end up making a bunch of mystery boxes and pretending and kind of hinting that they all relate to each other. And if you don't have a plan, you're going to end up ending the thing like Lost ended, and everybody hated that ending.
Yeah. I think that was one of the first really big, like, wow, I hate the ending to this so much things that I ever experienced in my life. And and there were a lot of bad things before that, but
Sure. I mean, I never watched the show, and so when everybody was like, "Oh man, that ending, it was horrible," I was like, "Thank goodness I never wasted my time on that."
And then they doubled down on Game of Thrones. That might have been worse.
Well, that was not a mystery box problem. That was a combination of like last season syndrome and like we no longer have any, and the author's not caring and all that stuff. Yeah, it was. I mean, again, I didn't watch those either, so I feel happy that I didn't waste my time on them.
Yeah, and normally I would say, the author doesn't always have any say in this a lot of times.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
George R.R. Martin definitely had the pull to tell them how to end that show if he wanted to, and the fact that they ended it that way tells me that he wanted that, or he just didn't.
Either
care.
Either he authorized it, or he was powerless to prevent it.
And it would seem weird that Martin would be powerless to prevent it. With, the guy would have been Hollywood gold if that series had ended on a hit, and it didn't. Yeah, and I don't think anyone cares anymore. Well,
I mean, I've heard that there's that spin-off series that's so far pretty decent.
Yeah, House of the Dragon, I think it's called. I watched the first season of that. I fully expected that I was going to be hate watching. It is so much better than Game of Thrones. Storytelling-wise, it is much more solidly written. and it doesn't look like they're going to go off a cliff, but I have yet to watch the second season. It could have already, for all I know.
Yeah, they might go off a cliff and you know, I mean, the thing about shows like that is that they often continue until they go off a cliff, and then they end.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing. I mean, look, I didn't like Game of Thrones very much. There were parts of it I liked. Some of the dialogue between the characters was very well done. Some of the characters were likable, but for the most part, it was like, yeah, but they're not doing any... Like I really liked the character of the Hound at first, but then towards the end of the story, it's like, this guy's not doing anything, and now he's dead.
Yeah.
And it just... I get that you want to surprise people to keep them coming back for more, but if you off a character that people like, but you haven't actually told a story with that character, people are going to realize that after they're dead.
Yeah, right. This didn't do anything.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, I guess we'll call it here for today, unless you have any other final comments.
Oh, nope. That was good times. We got some Vampire Hunter D in. We'll get more at a future date.
I really do have to see Bloodlust at some point. You said it's really good, huh?
Yes. You know what? We can watch it this weekend, and maybe that can be the subject of our next talk.
All right. That sounds as good as anything else to me. So, yeah, maybe we'll give it a shot. All right. Well, thanks for watching and listening, everybody. This has been the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I am, as always, Justin.
And we will see you next week with whatever it is we think up next. Possibly some Vampire Hunter D related stuff. And, well, who knows what we'll figure out. Anyway, have a good week, everybody, and we will see you later.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.